participants will be allowed to speak as appropriate. Having said all that, I am now calling this May 13th, 2020 Select Board meeting to order. I'm Claudette Brochu, Chair. We are joined by other Select Board members, Roger Arnold, Vice Chair, Rob Gear, John Langus, and Mary Layton. Herb Manager, our Town Manager, and Miranda Bergmeyer, the Manager's Assistant, and multiple members of the public. So first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Any board members wish to make changes, addendums? I see Mary with her hand raised, Rob with his hand raised, John with his hand raised. Mary first. Mary, you're muted.
I would like to move number 5, Planning Commission membership numbers before the actual appointments that we have to make, which include the Planning Commission. It's more logical to me to do it in that order.
Yeah, when I was reviewing this, it was like, why did I do it that way? But any objections by any other board members? Hearing none. Rob, did you have another?
It was the same.
Same.
Okay. Any other additions, reshuffling? Hearing and seeing none. We'll move on to number 2, public and select board comments. Are there any? First, what I also want to say is, if you are acknowledged to speak, please state your name and your locatable address.
And to signify that you would like to speak, and if you're on the phone, please push *9.
So Roger is our Zoom controller. So if he will see hands raised and acknowledge or point out to me who is waiting to speak.
So Gina Desconet has her hand up.
Gina, go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to inquire. I have applied for the Planning Commission, and I know you're doing interviews. I have an 8:30 online class this evening. I'm getting my doctorate in education at Peabody at Vanderbilt, and my class is at 8:30. So I just wanted to ask if it's possible for my interview to happen early enough so I can leave for class.
We will strive to meet.
Thank you.
If board members are okay, after we have a discussion about the Planning Commission membership numbers, we'll move the Planning Commission appointments up to number 1.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. Any other public comments? I see Cheryl frantically waving her hand. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Hey, can you hear me? Or
you're a little faint.
You also need to unmute yourself, Cheryl. Sorry.
is that better?
Yes.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, Cheryl Lindberg, 59 Koch Road. And I'm just making a comment as the chair of the Board of Listers. Tonight, I sent the Select Board an email with some information that I wanted to share. And at our meeting today, we did decide that we wanted to file or request an extension of time to complete our work. So I wanted to let the board know that. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, the document would be a part of your next packet, I'm guessing. If that.
Yes. My question is, Cheryl, gives you the flexibility to operate up until August 15th, is that correct? But you don't really need that much time, am I understanding correctly?
That's correct, Mary. We are looking at a timeline that falls fairly close to the normal timeline. But in our meeting today, talking with our assessor and looking over the timeline carefully, we decided that we wouldn't make the June 4th deadline for the abstract. So therefore, we would need to get an extension. We do feel comfortable about lodging the grand list on a fairly normal time frame, but we need more time for the abstract.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comments?
So just so folks know, if you're on the phone, you go to participants on the bottom of your screen, and that is where you can opt to raise your hand. So just for folks who don't know that. I'm not seeing anything.
Any select board comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 3, the consent agenda. Is anyone willing, any board member willing to make a motion on the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
So moved by Mary, seconded by Langus. Any discussion? Hearing none. All votes are roll call. So I will go by how you're appearing on my screen. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes?
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Moving on to item 4. We have to have a public hearing on the Woody Adams tract proposal by the Conservation Commission. Herb, can you help me out here? Do we have the public do we call the public meeting and then have conservation present, or have conservation present and then have the public meeting?
It's really kind of up to you in terms of how you want to handle that. If you want a little bit of a presentation from Craig first, and then open it up for public comment, or just open it up, have the presentation and go from there, that's fine. Either, it's just at some point, you'll want to close the public hearing, obviously not until you've heard the comments that you need to hear.
Right. So if anybody, unless anybody has any board member has an objection, I would propose that we have Craig present first, and then we'll open the public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work for everyone? Okay, Craig, I think you're on.
Okay, thanks, Claudette. Craig Lane, 782 Tigertown. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission. I came to the select board in early March to present them with an opportunity that I was made aware of by a forester for the Adams family, that Tony Adams was selling 186 acre parcel that lies between Chapel Hill Road and Turnpike Road, and between the town forest and the Guile Mountain Tract. And I presented in early March to you all how the Land Trust was endorsing this project, and the Regional Commission was endorsing the project, and how we have applied for a Vermont Housing and Conservation Board grant, which we'll hear about in mid-June. That would be a $150,000 grant that would help to make the purchase of the parcel for this forest conservation project. The grant would require matching funds, which we would spend a large portion of the Conservation Trust Fund and do some fundraising. And it would also require in-kind contributions, which would be putting conservation easements on all 3 parcels, and that would be held jointly by the Land Trust and the Conservation Board. I have some slides that if Roger wants to make me a co-host briefly, I can show those and point out some of the benefits of doing this project, or I can just talk about them verbally.
I'm thinking slides might be nice.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh, I think he's made me a co-host. So let's see. Sometimes they're a little slow to load. Is this coming up on people's screen?
Yep.
It is.
Okay,
Mine is.
fantastic. So here's a map of the northwest corner of Norwich, showing the town forest parcel and the Guile Mountain parcel, each 52 acres, and Woody Adams tract that lies between them, 186 acres, which if we did this forest conservation project would get us up to 290 acres of forest protected in the middle of a forest block, the middle of the biggest forest block locally, and at the top of two watersheds. Mitchell Brook and Blood Brook start up here, and their first major tributaries both start within this tract. One of the major emphases in the grant application to the Housing and Conservation Board was water quality protection and flood erosion protections, both of which would be serviced very well by protecting this forest and protecting the tops of those watersheds. Let's see, this parcel was originally on the market for $800,000 or more dollars. And that was too much for a conservation project. So I approached Tony Adams and asked him if he'd be interested in a conservation project. And he was interested enough to pay himself for a second appraisal from a conservation appraiser. And that came in at $510,000, which is still a lot relative to our conservation trust fund and grants available. And Tony was very generous and went a step further and made a donation through a bargain sale, knocking $210,000 more dollars off the price so that it would fit in our budget if we get the grant and spend some conservation funds. Let's see, the tract has the Blue Ribbon Trail running through it. So that's one public access benefit of the tract. And it also has an old logging road that starts in the Norwich Town Forest and crosses over into the Woody Adams tract. Here, this map has the next slide loaded. That takes a little time sometimes.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay, well, I'll talk about it a little bit while it's loading. It's a broader look at those three tracts in reference to the fire district and Downer State Forest and where they lie in the landscape. One attribute of where they are in the landscape is they're on this main north-south ridge line that runs from Guile south. And it's a very nice forest. It'd be nice to keep forest contiguity there, protect wildlife habitats, and conserve older growth trees for carbon sequestration, some of the other attributes that are in the grant application that make this a worthwhile project. The text on this slide are the 3 votes that would be required from the select board to make the project go forward. And that is to use the conservation trust funds, the private donations made for lands conservation by citizens over the years, to have some of the matching funds for the project. The Conservation Commission has already voted to use the $130,000 of it. It would need select board approval. The second vote would be if this project goes forward and we were able to purchase the property, the town would have to accept ownership and the select board would have to vote on that. And the third one would be the in-kind contributions of conservation easements on each of these 3 parcels. The select board would have to vote to do that. And it's worth reminding everyone that these would be contingency votes because we don't know if we have the grant yet, and therefore none of the other stuff could happen until we know about the grant. But the granting agency, the Housing and Conservation Board, would look favorably on a town showing intent to do a project like this. So the votes would be very useful when they're making their decision process for the grant application. This is a breakdown of some of the accounting that I mentioned. The conservation appraisal at 510, the seller's donation, the grant if we get it, and the combination of funds to make the matching funds. Has this slide gotten up there already? Good. The ones without pictures get up a lot faster. This one might take a little while to load. It's a little zoomed in look at the track showing the forest landscape. The brown shows you that there's a lot of deciduous forest up there, and some of it is big canopy trees, so it's a well-developed forest, which would be very worthwhile protecting in a conservation project. Easements on the parcel this is Velco's power line, transmission lines through here. And they currently have permission, they have an easement on a town forest to go in wherever they want and get to maintenance those lines. They're not crazy about that access because it's really wet and it crosses a brook. We also probably shouldn't be crazy about that access. There might be a better access through this parcel if the project happens. The local benefits, I've already mentioned water quality and flood prevention and public access. The logging road also gives better access to all 3 tracks for any wildlife habitat management and other forest management the town would want to do. And we would, if you vote on this tonight, in the affirmative, we would start working on a forest management plan and a comprehensive management plan for the whole project. A couple of photos. They may take a second to load. The one on the right is on the Blue Ribbon Trail looking north towards Guile. It's a great snowshoeing area. The one on the left is looking to the east, downhill in this big deciduous forest bowl that would make a nice low impact backcountry ski loop off that logging road. Tony had a couple other stipulations in making the sale, and that is that we name that parcel the Woody Adams Conservation Forest after his father. And his father really liked backcountry skiing, and he'd really like us to see us use that logging road and up through the Blue Ribbon Trail as a backcountry ski and snowshoe route. This slide is a couple pictures directly from the town plan showing the star showing where this project is, smack dab in the middle of the biggest forest block, which is a big component of the latest town plan is protection of forest blocks as mandated by the state. It's out here in our resource protection area, way out there, and in the biggest forest block. A couple other benefits. I mentioned forest contiguity being protected, wildlife habitats being protected, and with global climate change, resiliency would benefit from having this high elevation area in town, the highest elevation area in town, for when organisms need those habitats that are moving uphill as the climate warms. And the dark brown shows you that it's indeed the biggest forest block around. And a couple larger scale benefits, connectivity. Here the red star you see, is this one loaded yet? The green map?
Yeah, we're still on.
It's a little slow.
There it goes.
But what it's going to show you is that, yeah, when it's the darker the green, the greater the estimate of biodiversity, the greater the estimate of ecological importance. And so this red star is smack dab in the middle of a dark green one. Not as dark green as it could be. You have to get over towards the Green Mountains down in the lower left corner to get the really big forest blocks with high biodiversity. But it's an important one, and it's in a southwest to northeast corridor that the ecologists in the state think is a big wildlife travel corridor. It's small, tiny blocks to the northwest and to the southeast. So this is an important area for corridor protection. And as I mentioned, protecting the older growth forest up there would have some climate change mitigation benefits. I'll just quickly, well, actually that's if this picture loads, it's just an example of some of the wildlife that we've documented on that ridge line. They're more abundant there than anywhere in town, and their habitats are worth protecting. And I'll end there and let other people take time for comments or answer questions. This one might take this load yet?
Yes, we saw the bobcat.
All right, excellent.
Beauty.
Yeah.
can you stop the sharing of your screen?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will now open this public hearing on the Woody Adams tract. Any member of the public wish to comment?
So someone with the last name of, or the last two numbers 47, you have your hand up, you're on the phone.
And
I
we have
missed
Chris.
you earlier. Can you push us? I'm going to unmute you. Doesn't look like you actually have audio capabilities. I'm sorry. 847. I can't. Yeah.
That person who you're trying to reach, Roger, if that person could call into the meeting.
They are their phone, so so I
Oh.
can't. If 847 hears me, maybe they can. So I think actually, hold on one second. I think this might have been Linda. I think she was doing two phones. So let me, hold on. Sorry. Yeah. So I think they're Linda Cook's phone numbers, but she's Linda. If you can hear us, can you please push *6 and begin talking?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I've been
Go
trying
ahead.
to talk to you and you're not hearing me. And I raised *9. Did you see me raise my hand?
I did see you raise your hand, and but I couldn't unmute you for some reason. You're appearing differently than you have in meetings past, but regardless, you can go ahead.
I'm trying to charge my phone so that I can work off that, but so far I'm using this other one
Okay.
because I was trying to talk during public comments, but nobody heard me.
Now, so Linda, we'll come back to you then for the public comment. Right now, we're in the public hearing about the Woody Adams tract.
Oh, sorry about that.
So we'll come back to you.
How do I get back in again? Do I unmute Roger or you're going to unmute?
I will continue to do as you do with *9, and then I now know which one is you, and we will figure it out. I will likely have you unmute yourself. For some reason,
Okay.
I can't do that anymore. So actually, can you push *6 again right now?
I can. I've got my other phone, which is my phone, but I don't think it'll last.
Okay.
You're going to have 2 numbers for me on there. That's probably what's messing you up.
Yep. So Linda,
But keep me on this one. I'll go off this. What do you want?
*6, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I saw Chris Rimmer with his hand up.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, I am a member of the Conservation Commission. I'm
Can
also.
you just formally introduce yourself? And
Yes, I'm
locate
Chris
the-
Rimmer. I live at 91 Spring Pond Road.
Thank you.
And I am a member of the Conservation Commission. I'm a longtime resident of Norwich, and I'm also a conservation biologist professionally. I thought Craig did a terrific job presenting an overview of this parcel, and I will just echo that I think it's a tremendous opportunity for the town of Norwich in many respects, all of which he touched on, Craig did. But we don't have many opportunities like this, and I really hope that the select board will take a far-sighted view and approve this purchase for ecological values, aesthetic values, recreational values. It's just it's a win-win in my opinion. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you. I saw Stuart also had his hand up.
So yes, so the problem is, Craig, that you are now the host. So can you make me the host and cease your hosting duties so I can see all of the things that I need to see? Thank you for holding the crown. Everyone. Great. Now I'm going to invite all our folks here and everything will go back to normal. Sorry, go ahead.
So Stuart, you have the floor. but you're muted. Stuart, you're
Hello?
still,
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, so Craig, a couple of questions, if I can. First question is, what will the taxpayer responsibility be, or what amount will be coming due on the part of taxpayers? And then the second question is, will this, assuming that the purchase goes ahead, will the properties be available for mountain biking as well as for walking and other recreation? Cross-country skiing, will it be available for cross-country skiing, mountain biking, etc.?
Zero direct tax dollar spending. It is a parcel that would come off the tax roll, so whatever the tax benefits of having that one parcel on the tax rolls, there would be that minimal impact, but zero tax dollars are being spent on the project directly. And the parcel already has mountain biking across the Blue Ribbon Trail and hiking both on the logging road and the Blue Ribbon Trail.
Given the, Craig, thanks for answering, and I'd very much like to support this, and I think it's a great idea. And thanks for bringing it to our attention and for shepherding it as far as you've shepherded it.
You're welcome, thanks.
any other public comments on the Woody Adams tract? I see Mary with her hand up.
It's muted.
Not Mary Layton, there's another Mary here.
Right.
Mary, you have to unmute. There you go.
I did, yeah. Okay, I just wanted to say that I think.
Can you introduce yourself and your local address,
I'm
please?
Mary Selman, 1686 New Boston Road.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I think Craig has done an amazing job on putting this together. It's really been an effort on his part. It's his vision. And I think it's very exciting for the entire town. One of the things we're worried about, of course, is the climate crisis. And this would be a wonderful thing to have this big block of land for forests, for carbon sequestration, and just to have the center of our town so left so alone, so undeveloped, and so available for people to get out and enjoy. And that's really all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on the public or on the Woody Adams tract?
I would just like to offer an apology. I think some folks wanted to get into the meeting to hear Craig's presentation from the Conservation Commission, and obviously in making Craig the host, he was focused on presenting and didn't see your request to join. So apologies for the snafu, but all the slides will be are available or will be available for you. We can assure that. And yes, with apologies for the technical difficulties.
Roger, do you see anybody else with their hand up?
I do not. I can see that now, and I do not. Wait, Linda Cook has requested to go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. Is it possible to have can you hear me?
Yes, is it possible to go ahead?
Okay. Could you have the slides attached to the minutes? Would that be the way they're available to us?
I would think it would be on the YouTube account. They should be available.
You would have the benefit of watching the recording and seeing the presentation of it.
No, I'm on telephone.
After the
And
fact.
that's,
So
excuse me?
when this is recorded and made available to the public through CATV and also on our YouTube channel, you would be able to watch and see the slides that way.
Okay, because I was told at one point, and that's what I wanted to bring up during public, is the host has the choice whether to make these available by sending them to Miranda or not. So are all the meetings with anything with documents being saved, or are they deleted? That's my public comment, so that can wait for an answer.
I'll leave the meeting just in 1 minute. I just want to see if there's.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Miranda, but anything that's presented at a meeting would be included in a packet.
Yes.
Subsequent meeting.
Yes. Yes. So either, okay. So a couple of questions here. So one, the recordings of the meetings are being, as Roger said, they're being sent to CATV and posted there. And anything presented at the meeting, of course, will be part of that recording. Also, our YouTube channel, excuse me, the Town of Norwich YouTube channel contains recordings of the meetings as well. And then, yes, Claudette, to your question, generally anything presented that wasn't part of the packet for the meeting will get put into the packet for the next meeting. On occasion, things have been put in the meeting minutes, so it's not absolutely set in stone, but it will be made available. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and well, sorry, Craig and Herb both have their hand up, Claudette. I didn't mean to answer for you, if that answers the question.
I don't know which one to go to first.
Craig had his hand up first.
Okay, Craig, there you go.
I guess I get to go first. Yeah, this slideshow is saved on the Conservation Commission Google Drive. And I think I may have already sent the link over to Town Hall because I did 3 public meetings already as required within the 30-day period leading up to this select board meeting. But if I haven't, I will send that link and we'll get it linked on the town website as well.
And now Herb, who has his hand up, might be able to provide some clarity.
Just happy to receive stuff. Most of I think the slides that we showed tonight were part of the presentation that went before the select board before a couple months ago. So they're not, most of them are not new to what's already been seen. But if Craig wants to send them to me, I'd be happy to make sure that Miranda gets them up on the web page and everything like that. So
if there are no more public comments, I'm going to close the hearing and open it up for select board comments.
Linda Cook has her hand up again.
Yes, Linda.
You can let me know. I wanted to follow up on what Miranda said, but I can wait till you finish this if you come back to me.
Sure.
Or I can finish now. It's up to
No,
you.
we'll come back to you, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
So any select board comments? I've closed the public hearing. Any select board comments on this Woody Adams tract proposal?
Mary has her hand up.
I think it's a very worthwhile project. I'm very excited to get a bigger forest block in that location, and I think it's wonderful, and I will support it.
Anyone else want to comment? We're going to be having the motions at our next meeting. There was just so the formal motion to accept all of this will be in at our next meeting. And I am also one who lives not too far as the crow flies from this tract. Very much in support. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a great presentation. Really excited about the project. Just as a point of clarification, why do we need to wait for a meeting for the motion?
A lot of it, there was a lot of back and forth before this agenda was put out, because the grantors put off their meeting until mid-June. We were going to pull it off the agenda completely. We went round and round because it had been a warned public hearing for tonight that we would, anyway, we had multiple conversations, and it just kind of, to expedite it at our legal requirements to have the hearing, just to have the hearing, and then we would vote at our next meeting. I know it was, believe me, it was, Craig and Herb can verify that it was a lot of back and forth about what our legal obligation was, and could we pull it back and do everything together and rewarn and blah, blah, blah. So.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I wholeheartedly support this and really appreciate all of the effort of multiple parties that went into this. And thanks for the presentation, Craig.
You're welcome.
Okay, so following back and just coming back to Linda Cook.
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, I wanted to follow up with what Miranda said. I went to a meeting and there was some slides that were presented. As I said, I'm on the phone, and I asked about getting access to those slides, and I was told the host decides whether or not to send them to you.
Linda, was
not.
Select Board, Linda, was this a Select Board meeting?
No, it was not.
Then I would ask you to have that conversation with Miranda separate.
It's a committee meeting. Okay, that's fine. I'm just trying to see. It was a committee meeting.
A town committee meeting.
Yes, one of your town committees.
Linda, I'll follow up with you personally. Is that all right?
Nope, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So then, moving on to the discussion about the Planning Commission membership numbers. Mary, you were the one that wanted to raise this issue or bring this back to the Select Board. So can you lead us off in the discussion?
Yeah, I had a couple of conversations with Jackie Allen, who was current chair of the Planning Commission, who was just saying that just to be a little more efficient, it would be good to go back to 7, that it's hard to get a quorum with 9. And with everyone's busy schedules, it's hard to just get everybody on board. And also I was thinking, now that the town plan has been approved, that perhaps there are slightly fewer tasks to be done. So I would support putting the Planning Commission just back at 7 members. I also noticed in correspondence for this meeting that Arlene Rotman was also lending some support from the community for that. So that's it in a nutshell.
Any board members want to comment?
I'd maybe invite Jackie to make a quick comment on this, summarizing her position there. I'm not sure if I see everyone who's on the screen here, but I know there's a few other members of the commission. I know that we've got in correspondence an email from Ernie voicing support for staying at 9. But, you know, I don't personally feel super strongly about this. I think that the decision was supported when we made it. There was a higher workload though, and now we've had some time to operate under that different number. So I'm happy to listen to the folks that are working under it day to day and sort of take take the lead of our committee members, but I'd like to hear from anybody else who's got a view here. Starting with Jackie, maybe.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate that. Yes, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill here. Yes, I'm sorry.
Name and locatable address.
Thank you, Claudette. I'm Jackie Allen. I'm at 15 Union Village Road.
Okay.
And thanks, John, for the opportunity to speak. So I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill here, but I really feel strongly that we can be a better, function better as a planning commission with 7. It's a 28% increase in recruiting effort and administrative effort and training effort to have 9 for not a lot of value add, I would say. In our experience over the last 12 months, when this decision was made to go to 9 because we had 3 applicants for 1 position, we had a member resigned in August for personal reasons, and we were not able to fill that position because there were no applicants. The recruiting burden is large. I mean, I'm pleased that we have 4 people that applied for the opening when it was posted again. And there was some cries for more support, but at the end of the day, it's, you know, volunteer time is precious, staff time is precious, and we should try to make the best use of it. When we look at towns across Vermont, I think Rod can tell you from his experience, 5 to 7 is the norm. I don't really see a reason here why we need 9. If we're interested in diversity, which of course we always are, I think the way to handle that is maybe consider something like term limits, for example, so we can get more turnover on the boards. But I think just increasing the numbers, it doesn't make us more efficient or effective. And imagine for a moment 9 members on the select board, what that would be like to try to get, you know, organize yourselves. It's a big task. And once again, volunteer time is precious and we should make the best use of it.
I saw Jeff Goodrich had his hand up. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, as I said when you all reappointed me.
Jeff, name and locatable address.
Thank you, Claudette. Jeff Goodrich, 259 Beaver Meadow Road and 228 Church Street. As I said when you all reappointed me, I don't have a strong preference for 7 or 9. However, I do agree with Jackie that 7 is significantly more manageable for a variety of reasons. Having worked all over both states, 9 is rather large number. I don't mean to disagree with Ernie in a sense, because I generally agree with his concerns about process and the health of the Planning Commission, but I don't think that's a function of numbers.
Stuart, did I see your hand up?
Let's Stuart, where are you? I can maybe help by unmuting you if I see you. Go ahead, Stuart.
I think he's on mute.
He appears twice in my screen. Let's see.
Okay.
And the other Stuart.
I think there's one phone and one screen.
Stuart?
Yes, can you hear me? I guess you can hear me. My goodness.
Hold on.
Maybe put the volume down.
Remove Stuart the phone and unmute Stuart the video.
Genius.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay. Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Terrific. Technical problems. I'm hoping that you. I'm hoping that you. I'm hoping that you are not hearing also my rambunctious 6-year-old granddaughter and 4-year-old grandson. I'm hoping that they have subsided somehow. But what I'd like to say about 7 versus 9, and I'll just speak as a former member of the Planning Commission and also the former chair of the Affordable Housing Committee. I think that the two applicants, at least 2 of the applicants, have some very valuable background and very valuable things that they could contribute to the Planning Commission's efforts. And I don't know that the efforts are going to be lessened from the town plan days, because when you start to talk about zoning, that can get pretty complicated and it can be very time consuming. And I think it's important that you be able to delegate among yourselves some of the tasks. So I guess I'm a strong supporter of having nine individuals who are well qualified with a lot of background to contribute. I'm a strong supporter of having those kinds of people on the Planning Commission. So at least one of the applicants has sourced and worked with billions of dollars in affordable housing. I think that would really be valuable, given the fact that we are trying as a town to create affordable housing. And then another applicant, Citizen of the Year, is certainly well qualified given the number of meetings and participation that she's had as a select board member. And she is very concerned with what's going on. So I certainly appreciate what Jackie has said, in terms of additional workload and trying to meet the quorum requirements. I think those are points certainly to be considered, but I feel that they are outweighed by the individual contributions that several of the applicants have to offer. So thanks for hearing me out. Hope you decide to go with 9 members rather than 7. And that was the reason that 9 members actually was voted the last time was, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm certainly happy to be corrected if my recollection is wrong, but my recollection is that they wanted to encourage public participation at that time, and they didn't want to discourage people from being a part of this. So I'm hopeful that you will decide to allow two more members to remain. I mean, that's the way it is now. There were 9 members. So I'm hopeful that you will continue along that path.
Thank you. Any select board comments?
Jackie has her physical hand up again.
I'm sorry, I'm not finding the raise hand thing here, but Jackie Allen, 15 Union Village Road. I just want to mention something Stuart said. We do need members on the Affordable Housing Committee, and we would love to have more members on that committee. I just want to mention that.
Select board.
So my gosh. So I guess there's a couple things for me. Like, one, I kind of opposed this originally as an agenda item because I don't want to necessarily get in. I want to have good governance and strong process, and I don't want to get into the numbers question of the committee every year cyclically. I felt like if the decisions for making it 9 were still the case, then why would they be any different a year later? I think what Jackie has provided context for that, which is that 9 was tried and it provides a lot of administrative difficulties, and her point specifically about what is most effective and respectable for everyone's time, I think is really compelling. The only thing I will add is, there's lots of different ways to have governance, and every committee and every commission has their own different ways of building consensus and drawing in the public. And, you know, as we begin to implement aspects of the town plan, and we begin to think about crucial zoning decisions as a result of that town plan, it may or may not make sense to have additional working groups or additional ways to bring people in. If there's a specific question like septic that people are interested in, I can't imagine how you would not have a working group to take on that question. So, which is just to say that 7 might be best for its effectiveness, and the issue about diverse views or drawing on the collective expertise of our town can be achieved in other ways with a working group or another way to draw people in, right? I think we all need to be better at engagement, and, you know, serving in an official volunteer capacity doesn't have to be the only engagement of our citizens.
So I guess, Roger, are you proposing going back to 7 or staying at 9?
I guess after all of this, that may very well be my proposal. But I think, you know, Stuart spoke about the virtues of 2 of our applicants. One of the other applicants is Gina Desconet, who brings a diverse amount of talents to Norwich, and I think that Jackie, who reached out to her, you know, whatever you said, I want to know, because I have reached out to Gina and asked her to get involved in official town capacities. And so kudos for Jackie for that recruitment. And whatever you said to spark Gina's interest, I think is great, because I do know that she has multiple talents to offer. And so I will also say that.
Rob, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it strikes me, my experience on boards has been that the larger the board, the less effective, less efficient they can be. I mean, we're going to need to apply whatever changes come from interpreting the town plan efficiently and get the work done. And a smaller committee, a smaller commission tends to do that more effectively.
John? Anything?
No, I mean, I sort of said something at the beginning there. My general inclination in these sort of deliberations is to follow the leadership of our committees. So we've heard, you know, sort of fairly strong, and then, you know, supportive, but not, you know, doesn't feel particularly strongly one way or the other. So I'd say that balance goes in terms of going down to 7. I would add that our 4th candidate also looks to be very qualified as well as an architect. So I think there's no question that we would have good service from any or all of the 4 folks, which is not to say we should go to 11. So, you know, I think my default is to follow the lead of our committee leadership on this one.
I mean, I will say, Claudia, if I can jump in, that, you know, with that being said, I think the commission, I sense the commission, at least in October, may or may not have been divided on this issue. Like, you know, they put this question before themselves, and, you know, they didn't have a motion in favor. Obviously, that may relate to some of the quorum issues. And I will also say that in that discussion, the newest members of that commission talked about the value of having 9. And so, you know, I will, for some of the reasons that other people have stated. So, you know, I do want to add that into the discussion and make sure it wasn't forgotten, for whatever it's worth. Herb has his hand up.
Go ahead, Herb.
Just as a tidbit of information, Nancy Dean is resigning from the Development Review Board as of today. So you will have a future appointment on the development review board. And again, if you decide to go to 7 tonight, that there is another position opening it up that is just as invaluable to the community for those that have applied.
So I was one who voted at, when this came up the last time, to bring it up to 9 for the diversity that 9 could provide. I am not inclined to change that back to 7, in part because of the, okay, so then what are we going to do next year if we have 4 candidates? Are we going to go back up? We're going to have the discussion back up to 9, which leads to Roger's point. But I'm only one of 5. So if there is a select board member, this is going to need to be a motion and a vote. Also want to point out, if the board chooses to put the planning commission number at 7, then we thank all 4 candidates who have applied, but there are no open positions. So just keep that in mind. So then if there's a board member willing to make a motion, I'll hear it. Yes, Mary?
I move to set the number of planning commission members at 7.
Is there a second? Rob, are you seconding that motion?
Second, yes.
So a motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. We'll do a roll call. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I'm a no. So that's 4 votes yes, 1 vote no. So the select board, the planning commission membership will be at 7. And for the 4 candidates who have submitted applications, so I apologize that you took the time and energy to submit and thought about submitting and submitted applications, and the count goes back down to 7.
So some of our applicants have their hands up, Gina and Nick, and then Linda Cook.
And I see that Stuart had his hand up as well, but I'll take the applicants first.
I just want to say, Gina DeCognier, 427 Hawk Pine Road. I forgot that before. I just want to say I fully support the commission and have been in Jackie's shoes when you're running something and with the team. And so there are many ways to support Norwich, not just in roles. And I will really look forward to other ways to continue to support Norwich in other ways than I already do. So please don't apologize. I thank all of you for your service to the town.
Thank you, Gina. Roger, who else had their hand up?
Linda, who I'm unmuting now.
Hi, am I unmuted?
You are.
Can you? Okay, thank you. I don't know why, but I've got the packet and I only see 3 applicants. So I'm not sure who the 4th one you're talking about.
Late one.
There was a 4th applicant. There was an amended packet put out Monday, I believe.
Okay.
So.
All right, the only other question I would ask, and having not seen the person's applicant, is when did the application go in?
That's going to be, if we had chosen to keep the planning commission membership at 9, that was going to be the next discussion point. But right now that's a moot point.
Was that because there are applicants that did not apply on time? Is that what you mean?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, that's fine. I think it's great. I was on the select board and actually made the motion to change it up to 9, and it was because I didn't want to bring it up until you're all done your discussion, because the Planning Commission had to cancel meetings. And so we had 3 qualified candidates, and so I'm the one to move it up to 9 and see it going forward. And the meetings have not been canceled as much since they went to 9. But thank you all for your time. You are doing a good job, and we'll look forward to something in the future.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Anybody else, Roger?
Stuart has his physical hand up.
Yes, Stuart.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. Can you hear me? Great. Thumbs up. 2 thumbs up, in fact. So, yeah, well, moving thumbs up. So my comment is, I think that it would have been better and would have saved some effort if you had had the discussion concerning the number of planning commissioners prior to soliciting applications. And it's not that it's that arduous to submit an application, but it just, from a procedural point of view, it just, to me, it makes more sense to decide the number before you solicit applications.
Stuart, that we decided at our last meeting after this agenda item had been presented to the board before, and the board chose not to bring up the planning commission numbers until last meeting when Mary asked yet again for the discussion for the planning commission members, and there was support by the majority of the board at that point to have the discussion. So that's the timeline on all of that.
No, I understand that you have the liberty to do it in a way that you prefer to do it. All I'm saying is that it's backwards. You know, you decide on the number first, and then you solicit applications. Is my point. So, and I understand that you can do it however you want to do it.
Thank you for your comments, Stuart.
Thank you for listening.
If there are no other comments, we're moving on to our next appointment. And is there a motion to appoint David Hubbard to the Conservation Commission for a 4-year term to expire April 30th, 2024?
I so move.
Moved by John. Is there a second? Rob Gear seconds that. And I believe I see David. David, do you want to make a little comment or presentation or answer questions by the board if they have any?
I'm happy to. This is David Hubbard, 687 Chapel Hill Road, and I'm happy to serve another term.
Any questions by the board? We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
So roll call. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Thank you. Is there a motion to appoint Susan Hardy to the Energy Committee for a 3-year term to expire on March 31st, 2023?
I move.
Ha, you're changing it up on me. Moved by Rob.
Do I get to read the whole thing?
You can if you'd like.
Okay. I move to appoint Susan Hardy to the Energy Committee for a 3-year term to expire on March 31st, 2023.
Second.
Susan, welcome.
Thank you.
Could you introduce yourself and your locatable address, please?
Susan Hardy, 122 Kendall Station Road. And I'd be happy to serve another term and continue the work that I've been doing on the Energy Committees, especially with bicycling and our e-bike lending library, which unfortunately didn't happen.
Claudette, I would just like to offer in my capacity, in my role at the library, I work closely with Susan for particularly the e-bike lending program. And she has been an amazing and thoughtful collaborator and does a lot of good work in having us think more broadly about transportation. So thank you, Susan, for your application.
Oh, I lost you for a minute. My screen keeps shifting, and so your location keeps changing. Any board questions? Okay, we'll go to a vote. Mary?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to appoint Eric Rentz to the Energy Committee for a 3-year term to expire on March 31st, 2023?
I move to appoint Eric Rentz to the Energy Committee for a 3-year term ending March 31st, 2023.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So motion made by Rob, seconded by Mary to appoint Eric. And Eric, I see you there. Welcome. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Eric Brentz, 73 Dock Hardy Lane. Excited to volunteer. I've been volunteering, excited to do this in a little bit more official capacity for the Norwich Energy Committee.
Questions from the board? I do have one. Since you mentioned you've been volunteering but now want to do it formally, what have you been doing?
I've been coming to the meetings. I helped out Linda on a couple of questions regarding our subscription with Solaflect, and just generally have been trying to bring in my view as a newcomer to Norwich, I guess you could say, even though I'm from the Upper Valley originally. But I've been coming to the meetings and helping out where I can.
Okay, thank you. Anything more from the board? So Mary, how do you vote?
Yeah. Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Now, Herb, I have to, so if I'm reading this motion sheet correctly, there are no current seats on finance?
Correct. You filled that up with your last 2 appointments, and Miranda verified that with Omer either yesterday or the day before.
Okay.
So we can't do this one at the moment.
Unless you have a discussion about the membership of the Finance Committee.
Let's not get on that slippery slope.
I saw Omer earlier, so is he still on?
I'm still on.
Yeah, he's still there.
Omar, do you have any, actually, so, no, I take that back, never mind. You can speak if you'd like to speak, but as there are no current positions or openings, this is rather, we thank the applicant, but there are no current positions.
Yes.
So then we will move on to, unless Omer wants to chime in.
Only if you have questions, but I didn't have any specific comments.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we have questions. Next is a motion to appoint Jess Phelps to the Historic Preservation Committee for a 3-year term to expire April 30th, 2023. Is there anyone willing to move that?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion made by Mary, seconded by John, and I see Jeff on the screen. Welcome, Jeff. Could you introduce yourself and tell us why you want to join?
Yeah, I'm Jess Phelps at 448 Main, and really looking forward to getting involved in the Historic Preservation Commission. I've been involved in Historic Preservation Commissions everywhere we've been. It's been a good way to get to know the town's history, passionate about history, and looking forward to this opportunity. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? We had a rousing letter of endorsement.
I saw that.
So that's always a plus, and especially when it allows that other person to retire.
Yeah, that was unfortunate, but yeah.
So to Mr. Brink, thank you for your years of service. And if there's no further discussion, not seeing any indication that there is. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette is a yes. Excuse me, I'm going to have to go turn my heat on again in a couple of minutes. I think I swear, this is just a little aside. I think maybe less times than I can count on one hand that I have not had the heat on, at least at night.
It's a cold spring.
Okay. Is there a motion to appoint Deborah Bryan to the Historic Preservation Committee for a 3-year term to expire on April 30th, 2023?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by John to appoint Deborah Bryan. Is she here?
I don't see her on the list, but Jeff Goodrich has his hand up, physical hand.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jeff.
I've worked with Deb Bryan. She's incredibly thoughtful and creative. And with Peter's departure, I can't imagine a better person than Deb joining the commission.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none. We'll go to a vote. Mary?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Okay, and all right. Hey, we're getting there. We have one appointee. We're hoping those 4, everybody else that's looking for something to do in town, the Solid Waste Committee is recruiting. We have one applicant, and I believe we're looking for 4 more. So is there a motion to appoint Andrew, how do you pronounce your last name?
Shearer.
Shearer.
Yeah.
To the Solid Waste Committee for a 1, 2, or 3-year term to expire once the commission gets together and determines whose terms will be what. Does that make any sense?
It's a ratty motion.
It is a ratty motion.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, let me try again. Mary, would you like to make a motion?
Oh boy. Well, maybe. Well, let's do it this way. I move to appoint Andrew Scherer to the Solid Waste Committee for a 1-year term. Let's see. That would expire March 31st, 2022. Is that correct? How does it work?
Can't we just say, one could say I move to appoint Andy Shearer to the Solid Waste Committee for a time to be determined. One could
That
say.
works for me.
Okay. I move to appoint Andrew Scherer to the Solid Waste Committee for a term to be determined in the future.
Is there a second?
Can I second and encourage him to be the chair?
The chair of one.
So motion made by
Baby steps.
Mary, seconded by Rob. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
Could you introduce yourself and tell us why you're interested in this group?
Sure. Yeah. Andy Shear, 23 Hazen. Well, I feel like the solid waste is another piece of the climate crisis that we're all dealing with. And I feel like having creative approaches to that is another prong in what we're dealing with. So, so look forward to making a contribution in any way I can.
Now we can talk it up because we've got a person on it. You know, it's like the sand around which the pearl will form. So.
Yeah, it's not, I guess it's just not quite as sexy as the Planning Commission, huh?
Well, it's important.
I can think of some really interesting ways that we might be able to recruit for this group.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's, anyway, okay. Any questions for Andrew? Hearing none, we'll go to a vote. Mary?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So thank you, Andrew. I'm going to be recruiting like mad for you.
All right.
And I'll keep you posted if we get more applicants and appoint more people.
Yeah, just be in touch.
And I want to thank everybody in town who's volunteered or who has served and have decided to retire. The work would be impossible to do without a strong volunteer base, and we are blessed with highly, highly skilled volunteers. So thank you all. Applause, applause, applause. Okay, moving on to our next item is a discussion about our fiscal year budget in light of the coronavirus and COVID-19 and the absolutely devastating effect that's been having on our state and national economy. And I see this as a start and not as a end of some discussion about what we can be looking at, should be looking at, or do to help potentially mitigate some of the possible economic effects to the town. And want to at least start the thinking about whether or not we need to look at our fiscal year 21 budget that goes into effect on July 1 and see if we should be deferring anything, even some of the town meeting vote appropriations, until we can get a handle on what our August tax revenue may be. That's going to probably give us a relatively good indication of the financial strife that may or may not hit the town and our residents. So that's kind of, in the packet, there was a, I didn't see the Colchester letter there. Anyway, there was some information that I submitted, just heads up from about the dismal projections on the general fund and the education fund. And I'm just curious what our select board is thinking, what our town manager's thinking. And I guess I'll open it up from there. John, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of suggest that it's definitely an issue that I think we need to move to the front of our consideration, and think each meeting, whether there's something that we need to put on and discuss on the agenda. I would suggest as a first step that we ask our finance committee to take this up as their primary item to be investigating and considering advice to us about. I think that committee does really well with very discrete and specific requests for stuff for them to look at. Not sure. Yeah, we still have Omer here, so he can object if he thinks this is not a good thing for them. But there's going to be a lot of digging. A lot of things are going to be changing. A lot of this is going to be driven by what happens at the state level and even some at the federal level in terms of whether we see any meaningful relief for state governments. So that would be my suggestion at this point.
That was going to be one of mine as well. But any other select board members? Yes, Roger.
I think for me, I would always, and maybe this may maybe help support John's point about like a committee, but I always like to know how it is that we are talking about this issue. So, you know, what are like the broad headings to like deal with, you know, the potential financial ramifications of COVID-19 is like a topic. So like, how are you breaking down that topic? Like, so under fiscal management, one of the things you think about is, are there reserve funds to use to shore up gaps? Like that, I think I have some of the answer to that, but like that would be one of my questions. And then another one under fiscal management is what non-essential projects can be deferred, which is something I think you have articulated, Claudette. I think then there's the issue of like financial bridging, right? And so like if we defer all municipal property taxes, like what does that look like? And what does it mean to refund all registration fees or not have registration fees for some of our revenue generating programs? So I think some of these questions that I have can actually just be answered by Herb when it becomes appropriate for him to do so. I think he might actually be positioned to answer some of them now. I think might be an interesting task for, but may or may not be an interesting task for a committee would be thinking about like, I guess what is called service provision. So, you know, in what ways do we actually, knowing that our citizens, you know, and it's hard because Norwich is overwhelmingly a well-resourced community, but knowing that some of our citizens will have like personal ramifications in their own lives, what are the expansion actually of programs that we need to do on a level that will support their needs? So like one of the things is free Wi-Fi access. I think there's like what, 9% of Norwich right now that's not covered by like high-speed internet. In what ways do we actually, does that, you know, in what ways do we have the capacity as a town to actually put money into that as an entity in light of COVID? So I think that last point about like service provisions, thinking about an expansion of services in a financially responsible way in light of the COVID crisis may or may not be a task for a committee, but I think some of these other things that I'm calling financial bridging or fiscal management, I think is really a conversation with Herb. I said a lot there, but does that make sense?
Yes, it does to me. The specific categories make sense. So if I'm understanding you, you may need to repeat. There's this, and I'm going from last to first. There's a service piece, how we as a town can support those people as best we can, who may need the help. There's also the spending, the fiscal responsibility part of it, with discretionary funds. You may need to restate to make sure I'm clear.
So I think that last point is a little counterintuitive to, I think, your goals, right? I think one of the things you were saying is like knowing that, I think what you're expressing is like knowing that we're going to be in a financially hurting as a town given COVID. What should we do to mitigate that to every extent possible? And I think at first instinct that would be actually like cutting things. And I'm saying that some of part of to address people's needs in our community right now might actually be a reallocation or doing certain services that we wouldn't normally do. And so I think answering those questions might be good for a committee, but I think some of the financial bridging, like, okay, so what does it mean if we defer municipal property taxes? What does it mean if we don't have revenue from registration fees? That's like a Herb thing to me. And then like, what do we have reserve funds to shore up any gaps? Do we need to potentially borrow? Like all that fiscal management stuff, again, is like kind of Becky and Herb, I see. So I'm supporting John's point in a way that may actually mean redirecting or spending more money to sort of get at sort of the spirit of your question. Does that make sense? So yeah. So I've restated. Sorry. Mary has her hand up.
Mary.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was like a bucket of cold water to read the information in the packet, but I think it was really good to try to start getting a handle on that. And I think, there are a lot of needs besides that sort of come out of the, the shock to our economy. And part of it does reveal things like the lack of internet access. I think it's 90 people in town who don't get that. And I'm sure there are a lot of stressors, in terms of, people who are cooped up with each other where they don't always get along. I think those stressors are everywhere. I also am interested to know our strengths in town, or, whether our, just how hard hit is this community? Do we have at least part of our population able to work from home or are essential, so they are at least still working? And I suspect that it is a significant number. So I also don't want to discount that. I think that the towns that have, a disproportionate number of residents who provide services to our society, that restaurant workers or, people who, bus drivers, the kind of tradespeople and service people that tend to not be able to afford to live in Norwich. So I'm seeing that some towns may have a greater proportion of people that are really, really down and out right now, and thinking that Norwich probably has some kind of a mix. But if there's, I'm interested in that. Like how bad is it? How bad are we? How are we really doing as a town? I mean, it's depressing to hear about it, but if you're secure, you sort of hear about it at a distance. And if you're not, it's like an apocalypse. So I'm interested in how that is for the townspeople.
Yeah, that's part of my, what I've been struggling with trying to find out, because I also know we have business owners.
Mm-hmm.
And if their businesses are closed, but they're still paying rents on buildings or loans or mortgages on those buildings, and I don't know how, and Herb, I saw your hand up, I don't know how we can get that info, and maybe Omer or, that's way beyond my scope of knowledge.
Herb has his hand up, but I just want to say, like, I only want to continue this point about how to support our citizens if it is linked to a specific budget recommendation or specific budget recommendation, because I think like this idea of fostering community engagement and connecting people to resources is in many ways like
a different thing.
And it's like ongoing and important. But like for me, I'm actually saying that like we might actually need a committee to say like, look, we know that people on an individual level are hurting, and we need to do something extraordinary, like, like provide more like Wi-Fi hotspots, let's say, and the money for that, or increase the amount of accessible outdoor public spaces and what it would look like on a personnel cost to set that up or to have social distancing. So that's sort of what I'm calling service provision. It's sort of extending services with a budget behind it is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and Herb, before I pick on you, not pick on you literally, but I'm wondering though, Roger, I see that as a step to be done after we get some
Agreed.
way more information on
Financial bridging and fiscal management.
yeah.
Use my terms.
Herb, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so just one thing anecdotally, this is only through March, but the latest unemployment figures that for Norwich, there are 22 people that are unemployed, which represents 1.3% of the labor force. So that is actually well below the economic standard of being at full employment. However, that's only through March. So I think.
Right, and I went to the Department of Labor website, and the April numbers won't be ready until May 22nd or something like that.
Right. But that's going to be the start of seeing where the longer lines were for the unemployment. So I clearly think that, you'll definitely see a spike from that standpoint. But that just anecdotally, that's one of the things that's out, pieces of information that's out there. There are other indicators that are out there that a number of those are already in the packet that you've seen, specifically to businesses and how well they're doing or not. You're not necessarily going to get that without asking them or offering that particular information. But there are, as you've already shown in some of that, basically the major revenue sources. So at least from some of the standpoint, there may be some town-based information that's available, but a lot of that statistical information won't be available if it's only a certain number in the category. So that they're basically, what they're doing is maintaining the confidentiality of the fiscal stream for those particular businesses. What I'm trying to do that I'm going to have for your next meeting is obviously your updated fiscal report, which will be your balance sheet, and then the standing through 10 months, meaning through April. That will also have the $600,000 FEMA reimbursement that we received. So I'm hoping that's going to show a more positive thing in our undesignated fund balance. And then what I'm also working on is to actually do some cash flow analysis for the first 6 months of each fiscal year for the past 5 years. That's going to show on a monthly basis for each of those first 6 months what kind of cash flow that we typically undertake. What I'm nervous about is I think that by taxes being delayed until July, homestead declaration being delayed until July, the ability to, and I've mentioned this before, and trying to figure out what would be a tax rate to set in the beginning of July is going to be difficult, with your normal first payment being in August. So again, what I'm trying to do is figure out your typical cash flow needs, see what we have, for instance, in reserve, in designated funds, and basically that I think will help and play into, if a fiscal committee wants to look at something, start to look at what we may need to hold back on, such as I've already told Larry I'm holding back on the hiring of the 2 new positions for the Department of Public Works, because I would rather pay existing employees first before we dive into some new stuff. But just see where we're at, and I think that will be a key piece for us to have some additional discussion about where are we going to be the beginning of the fiscal year, where do we want to be juxtaposed with where we typically are. So that's something I'm going to have for the next meeting, and I'm in the middle of working on that at this point. And then there were a number of, just to highlight it, there were a number of questions that Claudette sent me in an email, which I replied to, which gets to some of the meat of what she's asking. And I did reply to a lot of, replied to that email. Happy to make that available in the next packet or whatever, should you choose to, but I think each of you received a copy of that.
Yeah, and I guess one of my, I think I don't anticipate that we're going to have an issue for the end of the 20 fiscal year,
right.
2020 fiscal year. The big unknown is the 2021 fiscal year, July 1 to July 1.
Right. Sorry.
With the education fund deficit, when I reached out to Tim and Jim, they were not even beginning. I bluntly asked them if they thought that the rebate that's not a rebate, the income sensitivity provision was at risk. So for those in the audience who don't know about the income sensitivity provision, if people have earned a specific, we get a significant portion of our town tax written off if our incomes are at a certain level. And that, if that is impacted, that's going to be huge. And it's a big unknown. All of this stuff from the state and the feds is just such a big unknown.
Right. Generally speaking, from the just looking at the municipal side of stuff, generally the dollars that we raise for municipal services, police, fire, transfer station, the town office folks, that's primarily comes from the tax rate that you charge. So it doesn't go up to the state and come back toward us. So I totally agree that there's a real danger, especially with a shortfall in revenues at the state level, never mind the federal level. But if you just put the school aside for a second, and I'm not trying to belittle that at all, is you could have a grand list this year, which Cheryl had talked about earlier. You know what was voted on at town meeting from that standpoint, and you can do the simple tax rate and put, if I'm just talking in generalities at this point, you could put out a tax bill to cover municipal services, and generally I think the income would be there because you're not relying on non-town sources of information or income for that. But that's not to say that when we see a spike of unemployment or what have you, that people have a struggle making the tax payments when we finally get something out there. But specifically to the municipality alone, it's not too dangerous per se. On the school side, you enter in that, absolutely, the state is in a huge problem.
And our tax revenues fund our school.
I'm just right, the overall tax rate, but I'm just saying, but that you're effectively establishing the tax rate for the state, and you're collecting the money for the state and sending it off to them. So that's why I've recommended that you have some kind of a joint discussion before you get to the July timeframe with the school board and school officials to have this kind of a conversation about what you're going to be dealing with, because I know you guys set the tax rate.
And I think maybe this is a little bit of what John was alluding to earlier about like having a specific budgetary question that some folks might be able to weigh in on, and then that we could also discuss. Like, so for instance, like the question that I'm thinking right now is there's going to be a very strong, overwhelming cultural sense of needing to enter austerity. That's just what it is. And austerity for towns means police, fire, transfer station. And so what does it mean to have a town where you're only focused on these three things, right? So while we'll want to make sure that we're cutting and we're nimble, you have to think about the long-term repercussions of what it means to have a budget of just austerity and to not have other kinds of offerings, so, and I think that is a little bit philosophical, but I think that kind of question can be made in a more pragmatic way and then put forth to a committee. Does that make sense? Like I'm actually concerned that for the next, half a decade, we're going to have, we're not going to like do the kind of infrastructure improvements that we need on technology. We're not going to be able to do the kind of capital budgeting that we need. And it's all going to be in the name of, oh, well, because COVID happened and we can only focus on the essentials. And I'm saying what we think of essential might not actually be essential. So I want to that kind of, we got to think about that. I think that our budgets for a long time have been going towards austerity as is. And so now there's a real desire from the public to have that. And so what does that look like? What does it mean to have another, half a decade of defunct technological systems, like for instance, and should that be prioritized over the other things that are considered essential at this time? So, I see some folks nodding. I don't know. That's what I offer.
And I guess to circle back to what John Langus had mentioned, and I would love the input of of Omer, and I had seen John Pepper's still there. For the Finance Committee to look specifically at the fiscal year 21 budget and designated fund balances and use their financial wizardry to help us maybe try to look into the future to see what it kind of
I'm really sorry. But I think we might want to do a little bit visioning to say, like, look, like we know we need to make these vehicle purchases. We never really had a robust capital budgeting discussion, with the faces on my screen. So it might be like, look, we know that we need to meet these structural goals, these capital projects, these purchasing of these vehicles. We know that we want to update our technology, and then pair those wants and say, like, look, we're looking at we need to have this kind of budget of austerity. What can be moved around to make sure that our priorities still happen? So in other words, like, I think there needs to be a very specific instruction, even of ourselves. Never mind another governing body. Is that, I don't mean to push back, but I think we need to.
And I guess I don't. That first version of the capital plan was a work in progress. Even back then, I was not convinced that everything that was listed in that capital budget was something that we needed to do or purchase. So I don't.
So how could we have a committee look at that kind of document if we don't have faith in that document? Do you know what I mean? Like, we have to discuss the tools that we're giving. I don't know. I'm maybe pushing back too much. What does everyone else think, I guess, maybe?
Yeah. What does everyone else think? Mary?
We should just wait a little bit, but not lose track of this. I don't think we should make decisions about it yet, but I think we should be thinking about it. It's very worrisome. I mean, it's always in the back of our minds. We don't know what's going to happen. We should just wait a little bit.
John?
So, I mean, I would suggest as a very concrete item, we've sort of developed a budget culture over the last 3 years where we've asked people to go through an exercise of what would your budget look like if something happened and you had to cut it, right? And we've had some experience with that now, and so managers are getting better at thinking about that. And so I think, we should be certainly looking for the possibility that that's going to be imposed on us, right? And the difference between the exercises to date and what this would look like is that, I think we've had a consensus among the board each year that no one disputes the fact that the services that are currently being rendered are the level of service that we want, right? So we get the cut in budget that's significant necessarily means a cut in those services. And so we understand that that's what that would mean. And that's what we would be looking to people to think about, is understanding that this necessarily would mean a cut in services that we otherwise in normal circumstances would want. Where do you think we would triage that if we get pushed into that necessity? I think that's something that very clear direction that we can have our managers start thinking about at this point. I think that for the finance committee, what I had in mind was not, I agree with Roger. I don't think that we want to abdicate the discussion of, if we got into that sort of situation, how do we want to prioritize those sort of things that have to get cut, and maybe some things that have to get added. But what I was thinking was more in terms of, digging in, keeping track of press releases and news stories about what does it look like is going to be made available to us, whether through changes in the tax prognosis, changes in state law in terms of what aid might be made available, and changes in federal law that might be making state and local aid available. And so that we sort of have a regular updating of our own understanding of what are the resources likely to be available to us, and where are we likely to be falling short. And then we can think about what the implications of that are going to be. And that can be a sort of broader, slower discussion, I think.
Omar has his hand up.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Omar.
I don't know if this observation will help, and maybe John just made the point. Sorry, Omar Tryman, 236 Main Street, Chair of the Finance Committee. It would seem there's a lot more questions than there are answers, and I know, Roger, to your point, Herb can answer quite a few of those. But if there are broader questions that need research, I think that's something that we, be happy to take on and provide that service, whether it's local, state, or global. If that's work that they'd like the finance committee to do, then we can meet and discuss and make assignments and report back what we find.
Would that, Claudette, be a logical step to think about key questions that might need to be answered, and obviously run them by her first, because we can answer them, we don't need to bring it to a committee, but thinking almost like research questions, thinking about research questions, to the spirit of what John was saying.
That's fine with me. I just want us to get started, because I don't agree with Mary that we should just kind of wait. I want us to start looking at this. And I know Herb has been looking, but I want the select board to start thinking about what are some of those appropriations we made that we might want to just not spend on yet. What are the, there's other things that are within our control, just to start thinking about it. And hopefully, if we can get info from the finance committee, and as Herb updates us on spending and where we're sitting and looking at cash flow issues, and we have the joint meeting with the school board to see if they have some insight, because Neil is the chair now, the state chairman of the school board group who lobbies the legislature. So he has probably a little bit more of an in than your average school board in other towns. So I think it's those kind of things I would like us to get started on. Mary?
I'm not suggesting we do nothing. I'm suggesting that we just try to inform ourselves. And we will, if we can do anything, I think as Roger says, it will have to be some sort of concrete action. So I think now everyone is just scared. You know, it's a scary time. But I don't really think we can quite act yet. I do agree with you that we do need to think about how we could act. So, you know, but I'm not suggesting to do nothing.
Well, I think, Mary, and then I'll stop talking because I've said a lot. I think this really gets at something that I really have wanted to do, but that is kind of hard to think about as a role and to work into an agenda, which is just figuring out formal opportunities to learn more as a governing body. So I think, you know, there are some questions that we might need to research or we might figure out. And I think, Claudette, what you might be posing is just, you know, I would like an agenda item where, you know, Neil potentially answers some of our questions for us, but I don't necessarily, we may or may not know all of the questions to give to him in a way that we can get the greatest value and that honors his time, right? So, so I guess what I'm hearing a little bit from Mary and sort of responding to what you're saying is figuring out how to be informed to ask good questions and gather information is what I'm hearing, and we can rely on lots of different partners for that, including people in our little Zoom screens right now. So, okay, so I think this is potentially a very encouraging conversation.
So are we okay with just having the Finance Committee do as John has outlined? Just trying to keep track of trends on a state, federal, and global or information? Is everybody okay with that?
Sounds kind of vague to
As a
me.
broad directive, sure. And one would hope that they do that as part of their work as a finance committee anyway. But I think, yeah, mentioning that it's worthy now, I think we should also work on maybe ourselves figuring out what the specific questions we might want answered are.
Yeah.
Maybe we could check back in at the next meeting, try to think of some specific questions or specific actions.
Well,
next time, or
they're probably, yes, for sure, because I did have Tom Camden reach out to me to see about a meeting with him, Neil, and Jamie, and myself. I sent him back a question about including Herb and the treasurer and trying to come up with a time so that I could approach Herb and the treasurer, and we haven't connected back yet. So this is for sure for the next meeting. I think there'll be more information. The legislature is not going to be in session very much longer. They've got critical things that need to be decided. So we should know more
by next time.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah.
And Herb will have more information, and hopefully we'll start, you know, looking at the 2021 stuff. So.
Scenario, yeah.
I mean, I do also, I mean, I can think of some questions now that I would like answers to, but I think we need to, so for example, like what does it mean to have a budget of austerity when we know that we have outdated vehicles that need replacement in the Department of Public Works? Like that's a question, but like, do we all value that as a question? So I think we should definitely write our questions and bring them back to the group, right?
That's one thing I would ask you, Roger, is where I have not heard any board members say a budget of austerity.
That is me saying that. That is my belief on historically. That's my assessment of some of our past budgets, which maybe is also a question.
And yeah, so in order to move, it's a huge discussion because we need to upgrade, definitely need an upgrade on our technology infrastructure.
Yes.
We could, that's like a given. The number of trucks, you know, we could go all over the place, but John has his hand up and then I want to wrap us up and we will continue to keep our eyes on this. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, so with all due respect, this has been a 30-minute agenda item, and I don't think it's really gone much of anywhere. So, you know, I think this requires specific topics, presented specifically for specific.
Yep.
But we lost John. But I mean, I agree, and it's my fault, and I'm sorry for keeping us on it.
Okay. So I'm wrapping this up and we'll put something in for the next, for our next meeting. And we are now scheduled to take a break. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Whoops, hold on.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
10-minute break?
Yes, 10 minutes.
Okay.
So we'll meet, 10-minute break. 8:39, we'll come back.
Roger, can you hear me? Roger?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm going to switch to my phone now, I think. So when you come back in session, I'm going to just double check it real quick, but I think I'm going to be switching phones.
Okay.
All right. Let me just see if I've got it so it's up enough. Am I off the air, I hope?
I'm going to pause the recording because we are on a break.
Select board meeting from March, feels like March, May 13th at 8:40 p.m. The next item, are we okay with how that earlier discussion ended? John Langus, you had cut out in your comments, but I think we got the gist that.
I think so.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So just to recap on that last discussion, we're going to be continuing to get updates and ask questions and hopefully come to the board with specific questions related to either our current fiscal year or especially our next fiscal year, and see how we can hopefully mitigate some of the financial impacts that may happen. We don't even know if they will happen, but that may happen. So moving on to the town manager's report. So Herb, I know it's pretty much full for you tonight, so take it away, please.
Thank you. As is customary, you have my written report in your packet for the first meeting of the month. I think there were a couple of other department updates that were provided either the last meeting or as part of this one. I know that there's a couple of them that are a little bit late, but the idea is that they're going to come in at the next meeting. But basically, you've got my town manager update. If you have questions on that, the written part of it, the typical blue letterhead at the top, please let me know. We did get a final sign off on the memorandum of understanding with the school district with regard to recreational related stuff. So that's, kudos to Bree for that and trying to keep that moving forward. I think that ultimately will be a good thing, but that may be one of those things that gets caught up in the discussion of finances in the future as well. I didn't put this under regular appointments just because it typically is a staff person that sits in there, but the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission, the Transportation Advisory Committee, usually it's the DPW director that sits in that particular position. Larry currently is the appointed person. I'm the alternate. So I would love to get a motion from you folks that would basically reappoint Larry as that rep and me as the alternate. It is in your motion sheet. if you wanted to do that or wait until I get done, Madam Chair. How would you like to do that?
I would prefer to get that out of the way right now.
Okay.
So is anyone willing to make a motion on the Two Rivers Transportation Advisory Council representative and alternative? Mary, please. And you're muted.
And help to be muted. I move to reappoint DPW Director Larry Wiggins as representative and Town Manager Herb Durfee as alternate representative to the TRORC Transportation Advisory Council.
Is there a second?
Second.
So the motion was made by Mary, seconded by John. Any board discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. Mary, how do you vote?
Yep. Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes.
Thank you. Continuing on, there's the Regional Energy Coordinator discussion is proceeding forward. Linda Gray, as well as Rod Francis, have been following along these lines. Rod put in the packet for tonight a set of essentially recommendations that they're trying to move forward with. One of which is that they actually would prefer to have a select board member serve as the key person on their particular steering committee, I guess, as they're terming it. So wondering if there isn't somebody willing to do that. It does not have to be acted on tonight. There is a motion in your sheet tonight, but if there is someone that wants to step forward or 4 people that want to step backward first, you know, there is that's there. And again, this is specific to the Regional Energy Coordinator that's being shared among the 6-7 communities that was passed at town meeting.
Is there a select board member that is willing to step up?
I'm always interested in energy stuff. I'm perfectly willing to, but I don't want to hog that portfolio if someone else is interested in doing it.
What I'm not sure of, Herb, and that I didn't see in the packet is the time commitment in the meeting.
Good question. And Rod went home, it looks like. So I honestly don't know the answer to that question because Linda and Rod have been going along those lines. I think probably up front there would be more of a time commitment and trying to get a person on board. In other words, the hiring process. And then I would assume once the person's on board, that administratively Two Rivers is monitoring that person, and then the steering committee is providing general direction in terms of the projects that are going on. So I don't have the answer for you. I'd have to figure that out.
And I think the last steering committee meeting, or the initial meeting, was weekday. So I don't know if that impacts your decision, John.
Yeah, that's actually not bad when I'm in town. These days I'm in town all the time.
Right. I think that Rod would continue to serve as alternate at your pleasure. So maybe there's a tandem teamwork effort that has to occur. So because I know you travel quite a bit, Langus, and I'm not trying to again double up Rod or anything, but he does serve on the regional commission overall, so he's engaged in what's going on at the regional commission anyway. So maybe it works that way. Maybe at least we appoint you, and then if it doesn't work out, we can re-examine the appointment.
Roger, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Just, I guess I have questions that will be better directed maybe to Linda Gray and Rod Francis, which is just like, has fairly joined yet? You know, like, do we have the final numbers on this on this position, and when will we be expected to sign a contract? So I guess that's all subsequent to someone, a select board member joining, and obviously the reason why it's good that a select board member joins, maybe. But, you know, I also wonder, you know, I hate to say it, but I will, to the spirit of your question, Claudette, if this is a continued priority for Norwich.
If what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
This is a continued priority for Norwich at all.
I think since it was a vote, I don't know if we can just decide that.
It's true.
I don't think for the first year we can. It was a 1-year obligation.
They also approved a different reality if Fairleigh doesn't join.
Right. But we only appropriated X amount of money.
Right.
That's right.
So then I think, you know, if whatever, if they cut down the hours to fit the money or try to come back to the towns to appropriate more money, I think that's an entirely different discussion.
Okay, thank you, Claudette. Sorry.
So, John, is this something, I guess I'm going to ask the board, is this something you feel we need to discuss tonight? I know they were trying to set up the subsequent meeting. Do you want to discuss it? Do you want to vote tonight?
Let's move it tonight. If, you know, it's okay with John Langus.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't I just make a motion? Is that okay, Claudette?
That's fine with me.
Okay, I move to appoint John Langus as representative and Rod Francis as alternate representative to the steering committee regarding the intermunicipal regional energy coordinator.
Is there a second?
Second.
So a motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any further board discussion? Hearing none. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
John?
Abstain.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Brochu's a yes. So 4 yes, 1 abstention.
Thank you. We are, oops, sorry, doubled up there. You receive, I want to make sure that I bring it to your attention. And that is the unnamed box culvert on Route 132 near Bowen Hill Road. That appears to be failing fairly significantly at this point, where it may be, I would say, based on discussions with Larry Wiggins, it has gotten to the point where it's becoming a potential public safety issue with regard to the roadway itself. With the wing walls collapsing, it seems to be twisting and pulling some of the pavement away. We're continuing to look into this. We already have an application in based on your approval back in April for engineering, a grant from VTrans. VTrans, based on some additional discussion, has suggested, though there are no guarantees, that we elevate it to a construction application. And then we would continue to do we'd be continuing to monitor it, but in the interim of whether we're going to get some funding or not, we may be in a position where we have to narrow that area to 1 lane, which would result in the need for a sign package, reduction of the speed limit in that location, a traffic light package, similar to what we had up on Beaver Meadow Road when we dealt with the slides last summer. And until we can determine more funding sources, and if we were to get a structures grant from the state, it's likely that it would not occur this construction season, but next construction season. So you would have another budget season to act on that, to find local match other than maybe what we have in the designated fund for bridges, which is not much compared to something like this. One thing that Larry mentioned to me this morning, and he is here on on, at least on his phone, to answer your particular questions, is that in trying to look for the cost of the traffic light package, that's wicked expensive. For a 6-month time frame, I think Larry quoted me, it would be something like $31,000. Which, if you want to talk about an austerity budget, talking next fiscal year, my heart leaped out of my chest when I heard that today. But so this is a situation that is just expensive. But we are trying to continue to analyze this, figure out what really needs to occur. That's why we really, what we're potentially looking into is not only submitting for a structures grant for construction, but asking VTrans if we could shift the money that was allocated for the Chapel Hill structures grant that we got last year, and shifting that into an engineering cost, because that's the 30,000 that we got from that would probably be about the same thing for the engineering and design work that we would have to do for that. So that, again, there's still some information that's out there for tonight. What would be appreciative is if you could allow me to, or authorize me to apply for that structures grant to be submitted no later than this Friday, the 15th. This is the same program that you applied for back in April, but the state has extended that deadline 30 days. If I'd known that, I wouldn't have rushed the other ones through with you back on April 8th, but I didn't know that at the time. But so I'm in a position where VTrans has suggested that we do this. Larry has put together all of the information. It's not the way that you like to do it. It's not the way that I like to do it, because this is just being presented to you tonight based on an email that I sent to you yesterday. But that would be appreciated, given the condition of and the real concern of this box culvert on a roadway that's highly used, including truck traffic and everything. And if that would be the last thing under my town manager report, unless you have questions of me.
Yeah, Mary.
I think this is one, even though it's expensive, we have to deal with it. I think it's just gonna cave in eventually if it's not dealt with. So we're stuck with this one.
And I don't know, do you want any update from Larry at all from his perspective?
John, John has his hand up.
I'd be happy to hear from Larry, but I think we understand the challenge here, and I agree with Mary. This is one that we got to do. Maybe could we broaden the I don't know if it requires discussion, but along the lines of our last discussion before the break. It would be great to have you and Larry, I think through what are sort of your top 10 infrastructure priorities, and how can we have those as ready as possible, so that if one of the forms of stimulus that comes out is for shovel ready to go infrastructure projects that can help money come back into communities, we are ready to go, and we know what our priorities are. Why there are priorities. I don't think you pre-write grants or anything, but let's dust off all the plans and let's be ready to go with that.
Sure. Basically, it would be an extension of the capital budget that we've put together so far. It's just adding more meat to that.
My one question is, are we required to have the lights, the traffic lights?
If you go down to one lane, yes, especially because it's 132. I would hope not. I mean, if there is some way out of this, trust me, I want out of it, because I was shocked to learn today that it was 31 grand just for 6 months. And if we're talking about next construction season as doing something, double that amount. And my thinking is that, boy, if we're going to spend that amount of money, are we getting to the aspect of purchasing a set of traffic lights to do that kind of thing over time? I don't know, but that's where Larry may have a little bit of insight.
Roger, you had your hand up.
Well, I guess, and since we're gearing up for Larry to offer anything to speak, I guess one of my questions might be, you know, it got worse overnight maybe, but it's been a long time coming. So I guess, I mean, this isn't new, right? This has been identified as a project for a while. And I guess for me, in this spirit of our earlier conversation, is this an example of kicking the can down the road, or is this something else?
This topic has been discussed since Neil Fulton was town manager, at least.
Okay.
And it has evolved over time. I went out to bid on this particular area pretty soon into my tenure here. And we did not have enough money to handle what had come in, and actually Hook Construction, one of the two proposers, had said, instead of spending 75 grand to repair it, you should spend another 40 grand to replace it.
Do you remember this actually?
Yeah. So, and then because we've been further, and then the changeover in the DPW director position, Larry has been constantly monitoring this. So is Mary on her daily walks. But what has happened is that there's been a noticeable shift in at least one of the wing walls since that is clearly looking, I mean, you can notice it in the pictures with the guardrail that's literally hanging off. And due to that twist, it's starting to pull the pavement away out of the lane.
And just to be clear, I meant it mostly as a point for us as a governing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If there was an example, and if this was a lesson in there for us, but it sounds like it's been on everyone's radar, and it's a matter of trying to accumulate the funds, is what I'm hearing. So anyway.
But it plays right into what Lang has said earlier in terms of, you know, this is probably one of the number ones. Now let's figure out what the other 9 are and get them in order.
So do we need to come up with a motion for this?
We do. Did you want to hear from Larry first? That was my only.
Yeah, I'd like to, briefly.
So Larry, are you there?
I don't know if he's on the phone. Can you tell Roger if he's on the phone or computer?
I believe he's on the computer. He has the orange screen.
So Larry, if you can hear in the upper right-hand corner of your little picture, there's a little blue, you should be able to, there you go.
I unmuted him. Larry, do you hear us?
Oh, okay.
Well, I think it would have been icing on the cake for me personally. Like, I feel like we got a lot of context from you, Herb.
We have the idea, yes.
Okay.
So, is there any
I thought I had one in here, but I guess I didn't.
willing to make a motion?
I can paraphrase something for you if you want.
You can what? I can't hear you, Herb.
I can paraphrase something for you if you want, to basically read something and then you can decide to change it or not if you want.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I'd be looking for a motion. Let me just find where I start here. That you would authorize the town manager, given the crumbling nature of the box culvert and the growing public safety concern it presents, to authorize the town manager to submit the application to VTrans, a structures grant application to VTrans by May 15th. Such permission would come with a proviso that no local funding would be spent on the project without further approval from the board, with the exception of the addressing the roadway safety concern as applicable and warranted, including the possibility of temporarily reducing the roadway in that area to 1 lane, reducing the speed limit, and installing traffic lights. And I would further add, I did not know the cost of the traffic lights at that point. So if you wanted to further lock in the cost of something like that without your, with your permission, I'm happy to cave to that, so to speak. And that was in the email that I had sent yesterday. So if someone's trying to see the language, it's in my memo as the last paragraph item.
I would like the light spending to come back as a separate approval item.
Okay.
But I'm okay with everything else. And so I will wing it and I move, due to the crumbling nature of the Box 132 culvert and the ongoing potential issue to public safety, that we
Authorize.
that's the word I'm looking for, authorize the town manager to sign
Apply for
a
Structures grant.
V-Trans Structures grant by
May 15th.
May 15th, and to allow for the safety considerations as i.e. or e.g. Narrowing the roadway, reducing the speed limit. That cover it?
Potentially the traffic lights, but this is with a proviso. I have to come back to you for that kind of, if we have to do the traffic lights with that funding.
And adding that last statement. Get that, Miranda? Miranda, could you read that back if you've got, to see if...
She's probably still writing.
Oh, Lord. Hang on. Okay. So you know what I wrote is get wording from Herb.
So I will.
I said, Brochu move to authorize the town manager to apply for a V-Trans grant, and then that's as far as I got. So
It's essentially what I read. It's essentially what's in my email, but just making sure that if there is any installation of traffic lights, that cost has to come back before the board first.
And luckily this is being recorded, so you can look back at it and get any specific language you want clarified.
Even then, it's not, yeah.
Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
That kind of patched together motion? And so is there a second?
Second, happy to second.
So motion made by Claudette, seconded by Roger. Any further?
Happily second.
Any further discussion?
No.
Okay, move to a vote. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Brochu's a yes.
Thank you. And again, I know this is not the way that you want to do business, but this seems to have presented itself to me in an awkward way. So I apologize, but thank you for your indulgence. And that's it for my report.
Herb, I have one question about our Two Rivers Ottaquechee River Commission representative. I thought that was a one-year term that Rod was filling.
Rod is filling the full commissioner slot that represents Norwich. The Larry Wiggins thing.
Right, but don't we need to reappoint Rod?
They do. I think that's coming up in the later on. I think they do make that change in the June timeframe.
Okay.
Coinciding with their annual meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for the town manager? Seeing none, article or item agenda 9, the Article 7 work, the Climate Emergency Designated Fund. Wondering if there are 2 board members who want to work on the language associated with that fund, like what it can be used for, all of the details that were not included in the article as when it was approved. John?
Be happy to help with that again. Sort of another one of those issues, but happy to step aside.
Rob?
You need 2 or 1?
Well, we typically do it with 2. You can, like how Roger and I have routinely worked is that one of us will work on something, send it off to the other, look for comments, reach consensus on changes, And when we come to agreement on a document, we'll submit it then to the full board.
Yeah, I'd be glad to be a second.
So, and I'll leave the two of you to figure out how you're gonna work on this.
Okay.
Any other board comments on that agenda item? Hearing none. Moving on to the Beaver Meadow scoping consultant. So, Herb, this is back to you.
Yep. So in the sorry, in the packet were the proposals for this, the financial proposals as well, the proposers that submitted proposals were all of their technical proposals were reviewed and prioritized before opening the cost proposals. The committee that reviewed them included myself, Larry, and then Rita Cito, who's the transportation expert up at the Two Rivers Regional Commission. Based on the review, we unanimously, in an independent review, came up with Dubois and King as our recommendation. So the recommendation is to move forward with Dubois and King as the preferred consultant for the scoping analysis at the amount not to exceed $28,465.91, and up to 80% of that would be reimbursed through the grant program that we received to help with this. For those of you, I don't know if you were on, Rob, or knew, but there's some funding that we received through a bike and ped program at VTrans that is basically looking at scoping for a sidewalk connection on Beaver Meadow Road between Moore Lane and where the sidewalk ends near the church. And the motion is pretty self-explanatory, and if you have questions on it, I know that that I can tell Roger's going to ask the same question. Is this something that we should move forward with? From that standpoint, that's for you folks to decide.
John, you had a question?
Yeah, so can you just tell us briefly why, so you included in the packet the different responses, which was appreciated. Can you tell us why you picked this one? Was this the low bid?
Generally, there were pretty much any of the firms are firms that have done these kinds of things. So you're not going to go wrong with any of them from that standpoint. But mostly it came out with low cost, that the number of hours with regard to the number of total labor hours involved with doing the particular project was lower than a number of the other firms. Dubois and King and Dufresne is the other group that they finished very closely, and we could definitely deal with each of those. So between the Dufresne King and the Dubois and King, it really boiled down to the dollar value at the tail end. And just we liked what Dubois and King did with regard to the public participation input that they're looking to have in the particular process, because to me that's a critical piece of this whole thing, because I do not want to relive the Church Street sidewalk project. So the whole point of this, and that's why this project has that public participation component of it, and we felt that they kind of hit the nail on the head with regard to the type of things that we want to get from them.
Okay, thank you.
And I have one question, Herb. This is not, this grant is not being held up like the Tiger Town.
This potentially is being held up with what they call the MAB, Municipal Assistance Bureau. Right. It does not have construction activity as part of it. I think the MAB is opening up a little bit, so it may be one of those projects that can move forward, because it's well, at the time, well, they've loosened up the construction related stuff as well, but we think that this is one that they would be able to move forward with during this, if we executed a contract with them, being able to do it this this year. And then if we were to move forward with construction dollars, we would make that application next year, which probably would result in construction activity the following year, given the fact that there's federal monies behind this and you have to go through a whole process.
Yeah, Mike and Roger, had a question.
No, go ahead, Claudette. It's...
I guess my concern is that these grants won't be released. And I would want the motion, if we make it, to express that we would not go forward until or unless MAB releases these grant funds.
Right.
We know we've been approved.
Yeah.
We just don't have the money.
Right, and it's a typical thing where we do have to front all the money and then we get reimbursed on an 80% basis. So I fully share and understand your perspective on that. I don't want to get going on it if I can't get reimbursed in a reasonable period of time. And it may be, this is, again, with a Roger question, this may be one of these ones. Do you want to frankly hold off on it until you have better understanding of cash flow for at least the beginning of this particular year? Like the bike and pedestrian things, most likely, I don't have it open in front of me, but the contract that we have with the state probably takes us through December of next year, because it's the same program that we funded the flashing lights
right
on the street.
So that's a good transition, actually, and that's sort of my question. This may be deeply inappropriately late, and so I don't mean this in disrespectful in any way, because I know that there's a lot of work that has been done into this, but seeing some of the visuals that have been part of this proposal, particularly where the captions where it says Blood Book creates both a scenic draw and a constraint for future sidewalk construction. And so it's providing a lot of visuals for where you may see sidewalks, right? And I think obviously a walkable downtown community, having bike access is a really important part of social infrastructure as well as physical infrastructure. But I think I do have to sort of rhetorically ask, knowing that this potentially impacts private residences. So I guess and knowing a little bit about what Claudette was alluding to about the actual availability of these likely lower priority projects, I guess maybe my question is, I know that there was a lot of public input, a lot of residents of that area came and spoke to this. Can you just sort of address that a little bit more?
Sure. Generally what happened is there was a collective of neighbors in that general area, probably 6 to 8 of them, that were complaining about speeding on Beaver Meadow Road. Chief Frank and I sat down in their homes for sort of a neighborhood meeting one day, and they were asking different things that we could do. And specifically, they were asking for a sidewalk as well as trying to reduce speed limits and all that. And I think it was a pretty robust discussion about things. They were supportive of us trying to do some scoping analysis, indicated that they would participate in the process of getting the word out, trying to spread, get neighbors involved to figure out if there is an alternative. A number of the individuals, not all of them, reside right on Beaver Meadow Road. And I very specifically asked them the question, well, if we go forward, are you willing to have a sidewalk in your front lawn? And at least those that were there said yes. Now, I already know that there are some neighbors in that area that are basically saying not over my dead body. But that's the true purpose. One of the true purposes is I don't want to just know alternatives. I want the public's input from the property owners along this process. And therefore, this is not a traditional scoping analysis where you put together alternatives, solicit the public for what those alternatives are, and then decide on one. This is doing that, but it's also making sure that public participation component is there, because I want to know up front, is it just one person that's willing to have a sidewalk in their front yard, or is it a continuous stream of property owners, or is it really just a group of neighbors that are totally different than the rest of the majority?
Okay, well, thanks for that, because I think you're speaking to the value of this scoping grant at a time where, you know, we have to question the intrinsic value of things, right, a little bit differently. And so I think this is an example of, you know, too, about we're going to allocate resources to what might be seen as a project not going to essential services or not going to something that's core, but, you know, but needing to do that in order to think about the long-term growth of our community. So yes, I am for this, for the record, I guess.
For it without, or willing to approve it without knowing if we will receive the grant funding, or moving the motion to include a contingency that no work will begin unless we know that the funding will be released?
I think I'm okay with the caveat that you had, Claudette, but I think that these caveats need to be loosened a little bit as we think about the years ahead. Do you know what I mean? In terms of the conversation we were having earlier about, you know, how to think about what needs to be done that could further, we're going to eventually be out of COVID crisis, and we need to think about,
right.
Yeah, you get the spirit of what I'm saying. So I think, like, yes, I'm fine with these caveats, but we can't always have these caveats because of the crisis. Do you know what I mean? So yes, the motion as you intend.
And it plays into what Langus said earlier with regard to the priority of projects. You know, does this fit one of the top 10 of our projects?
Yeah.
I would support it with Claudette's caveat on this one. But so I think sidewalks are always going to be somewhat controversial. They're great when they're in place, though. It will be a health improvement for and safety improvement for the town if we can pull this off. So also makes a nice loop.
So is anyone willing to make a motion?
I'll make it, but I might need a little help on the caveat. I move to select the preferred firm of Dubois and King as recommended by the proposal review team to serve as consultant to complete the Beaver Meadows sidewalk scoping study in an amount not to exceed $28,465.91, with up to 80% of that amount being reimbursed from the 2019 VTrans Bicycle and Pedestrian Grant Program. And this study will not be conducted until the town of Norwich is sure that it will receive the grant funds.
Second.
Any further discussion? So Mary moved, John seconded. We'll go to a vote. Mary? Mary says yes. John?
Yes.
Yes.
Or Mary indicated a thumbs up. John was a yes. Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Thanks. I know that was a tough one.
You know, well, we'll see. If we had not already been approved for the grant, I think the vote might have gone a different way, but any updates on COVID-19 that need to be addressed here? Or is
I'll be coming out with a updated press release later this week. We're going to be, because recreational facility stuff has opened up a little bit, there'll be some change there. There'll be a little bit of change to the Tracy Hall protocol. And there's going to be a little bit of protocol to the transfer station. We're going to start recollecting the redeemable bottles and cans starting next Saturday. And then it wasn't supposed to start until next Saturday, but allowing for 6 cars into the transfer station. Somehow that was interpreted today by the attendants as being eligible today, but it wasn't supposed to be without some notice. And then the DPW crew will be probably going back to the regular schedule starting next week. And I've already checked in with the union to make sure that was okay with them. So those will be the big updates from that standpoint.
Okay. Moving on then to policy discussion, which we can probably defer until the next meeting because we don't have the policy list.
We do have the policy list. Or is that not what you had in mind?
Let me pull back and I didn't see it in the packet.
So I had a memo, and then I referenced your table from last year. So there's an explanation
that was in the packet.
I submitted it, yeah.
Number 12.
But I'm happy to defer. I'm happy to defer it because it's your call. I mean, there's 3 things that didn't. Anyway, awesome. Did you find it?
Not yet. Hold on. I'm scrolling.
I think were there 2 separate.
So it was just a little bit of a memo. It was just a little bit of a memo that talked about what didn't get, that identified the policies that were a priority from last year that we didn't finish, and then just attaching your past work where you've gone through and flagged things as green, yellow, and red. So I think the simple thing is just there were 2 policies that were listed that were previously flagged as a priority that haven't gotten done, and someone should just do them. So yeah, there's that.
Which one was the fund balance? Is that the one you're talking about?
I believe so. Let me pull up my own packet now, but
balance and personnel, maybe.
So I think, yeah, let me pull up the documents as well, and then I'll share it on my screen.
Sorry, Roger, I did see that at the end. I don't know why I didn't. I must have got tired of reading about the scoping.
No worries. So I'm pulling it up now, but as I said, if you have it, you can read to us what was previously flagged as a priority from last year that hasn't gotten done. And, we should probably throw into the mix as part of this work, the animal control ordinance we should finish, at least present a full draft to Herb and Chief Frank, knowing that, if it can sit on their desk a little bit longer, knowing that there's other things they need to deal with right now. And then the personnel policy may or may not need to work in the months to come.
Animal control is an ordinance, not a policy.
That's right. But I'm throwing it in. It is an ordinance, but I'm throwing it into the mix.
Well, Mary was dying to do the fund balance policy, weren't you?
Yeah, and I've been sort of slacking off, but I will get on that.
And I'm happy to be your second on that.
Okay. Sounds good.
And then Roger, you owned the animal control.
Yeah, the ordinance. I can send it. Someone could be the second to review it, and then we send it to Herb and Chief Frank.
Rob, would you be willing to be the second on that? I think I heard him mouth sure.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Did you? I'm still trying to. I had the packet opened, and then I accidentally closed my tabs. But do you have the memo that listed the other policies that were previously flagged as a priority from last year?
Yeah, the color-coded one?
No, in my memo there was a paragraph in the memo that identified them.
That was before the color-coded?
Yes. Clearly our packets are too long as well.
Tax collection policy, conservation trust fund policy, and procedures.
Yeah. So I think the conservation trust fund one is like
Wait, how about if we I'm wondering if having Craig look at that first, or would you prefer that your thinking has always been one of us should look at it first and format it and then send it on? Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
I'm happy to start it, but I would need a second. Maybe John Langus wants to help me with that. The conservation fund policy.
Sure.
And I'm happy to look at the tax collection policy, and I'm still going to be working on the fee schedule that I promise will get to you before 1 July.
Sounds good.
The fee schedule update will get to you before 1 July.
Mm-hmm.
The tax one probably should as well, prior to the new tax year. So, and Herb will be my second on the tax policy. Is that all right with everybody else?
Fine with me.
So after we get through these, we should probably revisit that color-coded table. But my question for you, Claudette, is what do you think is a timeline that we want to achieve for this little bit that we just talked about?
Well, I've already said fee update and tax policy I'll have to you by the last meeting in June. We don't own those. To me, the fund balance one should probably be the same. Try to get to the same deadline.
Or sooner if possible, right?
Yeah.
So you space them out a little bit. Because they're hard to look at, especially if you haven't been working on one and then you're really trying to get the gist of it and get the language. It's not easy. I think it's time consuming in a meeting. So I think spreading them out is good.
How about by September 1, we look at the animal ordinance and the conservation piece? That work?
Sounds a little far out, but maybe.
I mean, should we just say one a meeting or one a month until they're taken care of?
What are we talking about, 5? Didn't we mention about 5 of them?
Fund balance, tax collector, animal ordinance, conservation. Personnel is going to be a boatload of work.
I would propose that the bunch that we just named be done by July, so we could spend July and August potentially working on a larger personnel policy. I don't know if that's
smart. We could try to do that, yeah.
That work for everybody else? At least that's the goal.
Yes, I think that's smart.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Herb, a little bit with like what to think about the personnel policy in the summer?
Yeah, fills my platter right up. So yeah, no, yes. Yeah, and I think with the union contract thing, the natural progression is to get back into the personnel policies on that. So who is the second besides Langus on the conservation?
Rob.
Okay, thanks.
Conservation? Okay.
No, I think Rob was the second on animal
Ordinance.
And I think I was the first for conservation, but I'm happy to have someone else be the first if they'd like.
An animal ordinance?
I'll happily swap you, Rob, if you want.
For which?
Conservation, which is good, but it's a fund item, and I'm not as into the funds. There, but it needs to be gone through. It's a good way to get familiar with how the designated funds work.
Sure.
Great.
Okay. I gotta change my notes already.
Okay, so now I'm confused.
We're good. I think I'm the first on conservation. John is the second. I'm the first on ordinance. Rob is the second. Mary is the first on designated fund. You are the second, Claudette.
Okay.
You are the first on tax.
And
whatever.
me on.
And Herb is like your help.
Okay, we got it. We got it then.
Yeah, that was an even distribution of policy work.
Next item is the dog licensing request from Bonnie to waive the fee, waive the fines.
The late fees, yeah. I think that's reasonable. Bonnie doesn't ask for measures unless she really needs to have the leeway, I think.
Just
considering that, Herb, you had a question, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you're up to date. I talked with Bonnie today because we figured this was going to be late in the meeting. Originally, she was looking through the balance of 2020, but she's ramping that back and recommending only through July 31st because she does have to get on people's backs to get them to submit their registrations.
So the motion set up with that new information, I
Correct.
noticed. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So is there somebody willing to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll do it. I move to waive late fees for dog licenses through July 31st, 2020.
Is there a second? I'll second. So moved by Mary, seconded by Claudette. Any further discussion? Go to a vote. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Claudette is a yes. Before we move into executive session, do we want to set the next agenda?
It's probably.
Sure. I have one to add to the packet. I got an email from Tom Camden that I forgot about, and something that came up tonight in the discussion reminded me, but they've responded to the draft for the expanding the Norwich Finance Committee to once again have participation with the Dresden Finance Committee to work on school finance issues. So I'd like to submit that to the board with the comments that we got and have that as part of the discussion if we can fit that in.
Okay. We also have the request from the listers, and we need to vote on the Conservation Commission, Woody Hayes piece. Herb, did we get a report back from SimQuest?
Yes, sorry, and I have not. So I do have the roadmap that I've got to forward off to you, and I know that Rod was the point person on that, so I can start to chat with him a little bit about that as well.
So is that something that we should be discussing at our next meeting?
Yes.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
The scope
Okay.
of it.
And I think planning is supposed to be coming back to us with what work we need to do for the town plan. Hopefully, I see Jackie's not here anymore. I don't know if that's going to be done by our next meeting, but just in case, I want to put in a placeholder.
It's like a report of what zoning would need to be changed. Is that what that
No,
is?
it's a report of what the select board responsibilities are now that the town plan has been approved. There are various groups that have certain responsibilities now.
Okay. All right.
You'll have the financial report since for April, since it's the second meeting of the month.
Yep.
There's some DPW vehicle discussion and potential purchase that we need to chat about.
Okay, well,
great.
Seeing as you brought it up earlier, but that's, yep. What's in the budget?
And I think we'll hold it at that. That's, and
Good start.
okay.
I have a
Herb always has these things that come up.
I have a question about the parking lot a little bit. So, John, do you want to make the Green Fleet proposal possibly into a policy? Should we add that into the policy mix a little bit, like present it to, or can we drop it from our parking lot?
I wouldn't drop it from the parking lot, but I would have thought that it goes better dovetailed into the capital budget discussion in this year's budget.
Okay.
That's, yeah, I think.
That makes sense.
Okay.
In the parking lot, we've dealt with the local emergency management plan. We're dealing with the Dresden MOU.
It's only the Emerald Ash Borer other than the Green Fleet stuff. So I don't know what we want to do about the Emerald Ash Borer. But that's
another disaster.
I guess it's probably putting that I would want to probably work with David Hubbard and Craig and somebody else to get into the financial discussion, the budget discussions for fiscal year 20.
Goodwin.
Pardon me?
Thad Goodwin should be
And
in.
Thad, yeah, Thad.
Would that include an inventory? I mean, if it's budget, you're talking about the cost of cutting down trees.
Or kind of have something prepared, because we know it's going to cost money to have some formal presentation with some, I don't know, some ideas and costs associated with various.
So you'd have to inventory the trees, or they may already have done that.
Yeah, they've done that, but there are some towns that are cutting down all their ash trees. There are other towns that are just cutting them down in the right of way. It's.
So can I make a suggestion, Claudette? Would you tell me if this is helpful, if this advances that out of the parking lot? Do you think it would make sense for maybe you or someone to write kind of a charge for a possible subcommittee that you could present to the conservation group to see if there would be support for a subcommittee or a working group?
Why don't you just charge the conservation committee with coming up with a recommendation?
Or that. I like
That's a good idea.
That sounds even better.
So maybe we can even do a motion. We can do a motion now, or we can do a motion for next week and move it off the parking lot. We should probably ask them first.
We'll do a motion next week so we can kind of give Craig a heads up.
Okay, great.
Good idea.
Okay. Then we're set. So now, executive session. We have 2 issues for executive session. We need to go in and out twice. I do not believe there will be any action on the executive sessions.
No action.
Okay. So for the public that's listening, once we, the only action we will make when we come back from executive session is to adjourn the meeting. So if you want to hang around for that, great. But otherwise, you're going to be forced to leave once we go into executive. So is there a motion to enter executive session?
Yeah, I'll do it. Let's see. I move to make a finding that premature public knowledge of the select board's position relative to civil litigation would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Is there a second?
Second.
And we'll take a vote. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger? Roger, you're muted.
Yes, I said yes, sorry.
Sorry. Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Now is there...
I'll do the second part too.
Okay.
I move to enter executive session under 1 VSA section 313A1E, pending or probable civil litigation or a prosecution to which the public body is or may be a party, to discuss a personnel issue and to include the town manager and or town legal counsel.
Second.
And we'll take a vote. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So the board is moving into executive session at 9:44 p.m. Is there a second?
Here, here.
And so moving into public at 9:53.
You have to vote though. You have to still vote. Right? Or not? Just
Oh,
vote.
yes, sorry, vote. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Claudette's a yes.
Okay.
So back into public session at 9:53. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
I move to make a finding that premature public knowledge of the select board's position relative to ongoing union contract negotiations would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Second.
And we'll vote. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Second part of that motion?
I move to enter executive session under 1 VSA section 313A1B, labor relations agreements with employees, to discuss union contract negotiations and to include the town manager.
You're on a roll, John.
Second.
Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Okay. Awesome.
Your public session.
There's
Second.
That was a dueling second. I don't know who did that.
I got Langus.
Okay. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Brochu's a yes. So back in public session at 10:06. Just before we adjourn, Roger, you had mentioned a possible May 27th agenda item on the fair impartial policing policy draft that Herb had forwarded to the board. I don't know if you want to take that up on May 22nd.
So where our conversation left was that I would submit the Word document version of the PDF that has been circulating in various packets for a long time and
Yep.
send it to Herb. And then my expectation is that that would be then prepared for signature. I think if there's anything else that goes that needs to be addressed, if there's anything else that needs to happen, then we may or may not need to have an agenda item. That's what I would say right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I just need I just want the final version of Word so I can put the letterhead and signature page on it and then get it back out to you folks. You know, I guess we got to do electronic signatures on this.
Yeah, and I think, yes, that's what I will say right now. So I don't know what the agenda item may or may not be. Herb may request an agenda item if he feels like there should be any other action outside of just signing what the FIPP is, and if we should just be discussing an additional policy or a different policy, then obviously we should have an agenda item.
Okay. All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
John?
Aye.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot, guys.
See you in
Right.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Nice to see you.